The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the cracked sidewalk of Pine Grove Avenue. It was the kind of summer heat that made the air shimmer above the pavement and sent most residents retreating indoors to the comfort of air conditioning. But not everyone had that luxury. Jack and Olivia Turner, 8-year-old twins with matching freckles and determined expressions, sat behind a wobbly card table they'd dragged from their garage to the front yard. The table displayed an assortment of wooden toys, small cars with spinning wheels, delicately carved animals, and puzzles with interlocking pieces. A hand-drawn sign taped to the front of the table read, "Handmade toys, $5 each," in uneven blue marker. "Do you think anyone will stop?" Olivia asked, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. Jack shrugged, adjusting the wooden train engine at the center of their display. "Grandpa says good craftsmanship always finds buyers." "I hope so," Olivia whispered, glancing back toward their modest single-story house, where their mother was having one of her bad days. The twins had been sitting outside for nearly 2 hours, and so far, only Mrs. Gutierrez from next door had stopped to buy a small wooden bird. Business was slow in a neighborhood where most families watched their spending carefully. The distinctive purr of a luxury engine caught their attention before they even saw the car. When the sleek black Bentley turned onto their street, both children stared in amazement. Such vehicles never appeared in their neighborhood of sun-bleached homes and decade-old sedans. The Bentley slowed as it approached their stand, eventually coming to a complete stop. The driver's window descended silently, revealing a man in his early 50s with salt and pepper hair and a tailored suit that probably cost more than 6 months of their mother's rent. "Hello there," the man said, his voice carrying an authority that seemed as natural to him as breathing. "What have we got here?" "We're selling toys," Jack answered. "Our grandpa makes them." The man's eyes narrowed slightly as he surveyed the humble display. Something in his expression shifted, a spark of interest that went beyond mere curiosity. He turned off the engine and stepped out of the car, his Italian leather shoes looking oddly out of place on their worn sidewalk. "I'm Alexander Blackwood," he said, extending his hand first to Jack, then to Olivia, treating them with the same formality he might offer business associates. "May I take a closer look at your inventory?" The twins exchanged glances, surprised by his formal language. "I'm Jack, and this is my sister Olivia," Jack replied, straightening his posture. "Please, look at anything you want." Alexander bent down, examining a wooden puzzle with the intensity of someone appraising fine art. His fingers traced the smooth edges of the pieces, testing how they fit together. "This craftsmanship is extraordinary," he murmured, almost to himself. "The precision of these joints, the sanding technique." He picked up a small wooden car, turning it to catch the light. "Your grandfather made all of these?" Olivia nodded. "He has a workshop in the garage. He taught us how to sand the edges, but he does all the cutting and carving." "The finish is remarkable," Alexander said, setting the car down gently. "Why are you selling them? Is this a summer project?" The twins exchanged another look, this one more hesitant. "Our mum needs medicine," Jack said finally. "She has MS. Multiple sclerosis," Olivia added, pronouncing the words carefully. "She lost her job at the bank when they downsized, and now her insurance is gone." Alexander's expression changed again, the businesslike demeanor softening almost imperceptibly. "I see." He continued examining the toys, picking up each one as if conducting a thorough inventory. When he reached for a small wooden fox with a bushy tail, he noticed a distinctive birthmark on Olivia's wrist, a light brown patch shaped like a crescent moon. Alexander froze, his hand hovering mid-air. The blood drained from his face. "Sir, are you okay?" Jack asked, leaning forward with concern. Alexander seemed to struggle for composure. "That birthmark," he said, his voice suddenly hoarse. "On your wrist." Olivia glanced down self-consciously. "I've had it since I was born. Mum says it looks like a half moon." Alexander swallowed hard. "My sister had the exact same mark." He paused, studying both children's faces more intensely now. "What's your mother's name?" "Jessica Turner," Jack answered, growing slightly uncomfortable under the man's intense gaze. Alexander's breath caught. He steadied himself against the table, causing several toys to wobble. "And your grandfather? What's his name?" "Thomas Turner," Olivia replied. "Everyone calls him Tom." The revelation seemed to hit Alexander like a physical blow. He took a step back, struggling to maintain his composure. "Are you sure you're okay?" Jack asked again. "Yes," Alexander managed, drawing a deep breath. "I'd like to buy all of your toys, every single one." The twins' eyes widened simultaneously. "Really? All of them?" Olivia asked. "Absolutely." Alexander pulled out his wallet, extracting several $100 bills. "Would this cover it?" "I believe it's more than the asking price, but the quality justifies it." Jack stared at the money. "But that's way too much. These are finely crafted pieces that would sell for much more in upscale boutiques," Alexander interrupted. "I'm getting a bargain." Olivia looked dubious. "Our mum taught us not to take charity." Alexander's expression softened. "This isn't charity, it's recognition of value." He placed the money on the table. "Perhaps you could introduce me to your grandfather. I'd like to discuss commissioning more of his work." Before either child could respond, the front door of the house opened, and a thin woman in her late 30s stepped onto the porch. Despite her obvious fatigue, Jessica Turner had the same warm brown eyes as her children and moved with deliberate care down the steps. "Kids, everything okay out here?" she called, eyeing the luxury car with suspicion. Alexander turned toward her voice, and for a moment he seemed unable to move. 20 years had passed since he'd last seen his sister, his younger sister, with whom he'd shared a childhood before ambition and resentment drove them apart. The bitter argument that had ended with him walking away, too proud to apologize, too determined to prove himself. The woman approaching them had the same high cheekbones and graceful neck as the teenager he remembered, but time and illness had left their mark. She moved carefully, one hand staying close to nearby objects for support. "Mum," Jack called, "this man wants to buy all our toys." Jessica reached the table, her gaze shifting from her excited children to the stranger in the expensive suit. "That's very generous, but—" "Alexander Blackwood," he said, extending his hand, fighting to keep his voice steady. Would she recognize him? The angry young man with something to prove had become the polished CEO, his appearance transformed by success and the passage of time. Jessica shook his hand briefly. "Jessica Turner. These are my children, Jack and Olivia." No recognition flickered in her eyes. Alexander felt a mixture of relief and heartache. "Your father's craftsmanship is exceptional," he said, gesturing to the toys. "I'd be interested in commissioning more pieces if he's available." "Dad's resting," Jessica replied cautiously. "He pushes himself too hard in that workshop." From inside the house came a gruff voice. "Who's talking about me?" Thomas Turner appeared at the doorway, a tall man in his 70s with work-hardened hands and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He assessed the scene quickly, the luxury car, the well-dressed stranger, the money on the table, and made his way down to join them. "Tom Turner," he said simply, his handshake firm and calloused. "Alexander Blackwood, Alexander replied, meeting the older man's evaluating gaze. "I was just admiring your craftsmanship." Tom's eyes narrowed slightly. "These are just simple toys." "Created with exceptional skill," Alexander countered. "I've purchased your entire inventory, and I'd like to discuss acquiring more." Tom studied him with the shrewd assessment of someone who recognizes calculation when he sees it. Why would a man in a car like that be interested in wooden toys from a neighborhood like this? The directness of the question caught Alexander off guard. Before he could answer, Jessica swayed slightly, reaching for the table to steady herself. "Mom?" Olivia was instantly at her side. "I'm fine," Jessica insisted, though her pallor suggested otherwise. "Just need to sit down for a minute." Alexander watched as the twins guided their mother to a folding chair in the shade, their movements revealing a practiced routine. In that moment, looking at his sister's pallid face, the successful CEO made a decision that would alter all of their lives. He would help this family, his family, without revealing who he was. Not yet. Perhaps not ever, if that would be easier for them. But he would find a way to ensure they had everything they needed. And somewhere along the way, perhaps he would find what he needed too: redemption for 20 years of silence and the chance to know the family he had lost. 2 weeks after their first meeting, Alexander sat in his downtown office overlooking the Phoenix skyline. The wooden fox from the twins' stand sat on his desk, a stark contrast to the sleek glass and chrome surrounding it. He couldn't stop thinking about Jessica and her children. His assistant, Nancy, entered with a stack of papers. "The background report you requested, sir." "Thank you," Alexander said, taking the folder. He had hired a private investigator to learn more about the Turner family, professionally justified as research for potential investment in local artisans, though his true motives were far more personal. As Nancy left, Alexander opened the folder. The report confirmed what he already suspected. Jessica Turner, formerly Jessica Blackwood, had struggled financially since her MS diagnosis 3 years ago. Her medical costs were substantial, and without insurance, she relied on community clinics and payment plans. Thomas Turner, her father, had moved in to help after her husband died in a construction accident 5 years earlier. Alexander leaned back in his chair, the weight of guilt pressing down on him. 20 years ago, when their parents died, he'd been too focused on his burgeoning tech career to help his teenage sister. Their argument, his insistence that she attend college rather than art school, her defiance in choosing her own path, had created a rift neither had bridged. By the time he'd made his first million and was ready to reconnect, Jessica had disappeared, changing her name after marriage. Now, fate had given him a second chance. But how to approach without seeming like a wealthy outsider offering charity? The answer came from an unexpected source. A week later, Alexander spotted a flyer at his local coffee shop. Phoenix Youth Entrepreneur Fair, supporting young business minds. It listed contact information for community businesses interested in mentoring local children. "Mr. Blackwood is here," Jack announced, bursting into the kitchen where Jessica was preparing dinner with Olivia's help. Thomas looked up from the newspaper, his eyes narrowing. "The fancy car fellow? What's he want now?" Before Jessica could answer, Alexander appeared in the doorway, dressed more casually than before in slacks and a button-down shirt, though still noticeably expensive. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said, holding a sleek laptop case. "I called earlier about the Youth Entrepreneur Program." Jessica wiped her hands on a dishcloth. "Yes, of course. Please come in." Alexander had called 2 days earlier, explaining he wanted to mentor young entrepreneurs and had been connected to the twins through the community program coordinator. Jessica had been hesitant, but couldn't deny her children this opportunity. We're just finishing dinner prep, Jessica said. Would you like to join us? It's nothing fancy, just chicken and vegetables. I'd be honored, Alexander replied, surprised by the invitation. As they gathered around the table, Alexander observed the family dynamics. Thomas said a brief grace before they ate, Jack talked excitedly about school, and Olivia asked thoughtful questions about Alexander's work. Jessica managed the conversation with quiet dignity, despite her obvious fatigue. So you run a tech company, Thomas said, his tone suggesting skepticism. Black Edge Technologies, Alexander confirmed. We specialize in security software and data protection. And you have time to mentor kids selling wooden toys? Thomas pressed. Alexander met the older man's gaze. Success means little if not shared, Mr. Turner. Your grandchildren show remarkable initiative. They get that from their mother, Thomas said pointedly. Jessica changed the subject. The kids mentioned you bought all their inventory. Did you really want so many toys? Alexander smiled. They've been very popular gifts for my executives' children. Your father's craftsmanship is exceptional. After dinner, Alexander opened his laptop at the kitchen table. Jack and Olivia sat on either side of him, eyes wide as he showed them a simple spreadsheet. Every business starts with understanding your numbers, he explained. How much does each toy cost to make? The twins looked at each other uncertainly. You need to factor in materials, time and overhead, Alexander continued. Your grandfather's time is valuable. Thomas, who had been pretending to read his newspaper while listening, spoke up. Pine costs me about $8 per board foot. Each small toy uses roughly a quarter foot. Sandpaper, finish, and other supplies add another $1 per toy. Alexander nodded appreciatively. Thank you, Mr. Turner. So materials cost about $3 per toy. Now how long does each toy take to make? 2 to 3 hours for the simple ones, Thomas answered. More for the puzzles. Alexander turned to the twins. So if we value your grandfather's skilled time at, say, $20 an hour... That's too much, Thomas interrupted. It's actually below market rate for skilled craftsmanship, Alexander replied firmly. At that rate, each toy costs about $43 to produce, plus your time selling. Your $5 price point means you're operating at a significant loss. Olivia's face fell. So we're doing it wrong? Alexander softened his tone. Not at all. You've created a product people want. Now we just need to adjust your pricing strategy. Jack looked worried. But people in our neighborhood can't pay more. That's where market research comes in, Alexander said. We need to find customers who can afford the true value of these toys. For the next hour, Alexander guided the twins through the basics of business planning. Jessica observed from the doorway, struck by the patient way he explained concepts, never talking down to the children. As the session concluded, Alexander reached into his laptop bag. I have something for you both. He handed each twin a business card holder embossed with their names. These are real business cards, Olivia exclaimed, reading aloud. Turner Toys, handcrafted treasures. Every entrepreneur needs proper materials, Alexander said. I took the liberty of having these made. The back has the information for the artisan market at Camelback Mall. I've reserved a table for you this Saturday. Jessica stepped forward. That's in Scottsdale. It's an upscale market. Precisely. Alexander nodded. The clientele there will appreciate fine craftsmanship and pay accordingly. The table fee is covered through the mentorship program. Thomas joined them, examining one of the cards. This is mighty generous, Mr. Blackwood. Alexander met the older man's suspicious gaze. I recognize potential when I see it, Mr. Turner. After Alexander left, the family gathered in the living room. I don't trust him, Thomas said flatly. Men like that always have angles. Dad, Jessica sighed. Not everyone has hidden motives. The mentorship program is legitimate. I checked. He seems nice, Jack offered, and he knows a lot about business. But why us? Thomas persisted. Of all the kids in Phoenix, why pick Jack and Olivia? Jessica massaged her temples, fighting a headache. Does it matter? This could really help with my medical bills. Olivia, who had been quiet, spoke up. I think he seems sad. The adults turned to her, surprised. What do you mean, sweetie? Jessica asked. Olivia shrugged. When he looks at you, Mom, he looks sad, like he lost something. Saturday morning found the Turner family setting up their display at the artisan market. Alexander arrived early to help, bringing professional signage and display stands. These toys need proper presentation, he explained, arranging the wooden animals on a tiered platform. By mid-morning, a steady stream of customers visited their table. As Alexander had predicted, the upscale shoppers appreciated Thomas's craftsmanship and didn't blink at the new prices. $45 for animals, $60 for the puzzle sets. During a quiet moment, Alexander noticed Jessica wincing as she shifted weight. Are you all right? He asked quietly. Just tired, she said. The heat makes symptoms worse sometimes. Alexander frowned. There's a cafe with air conditioning across the hall. Let me take you there, while the kids and your father handle things here. Jessica started to refuse, then relented as pain flared in her legs. Just for a few minutes. In the cool cafe, Alexander ordered iced tea for them both. Jessica studied him curiously. You're not what I expected, she admitted. Oh? What did you expect? Someone more? She searched for the word. Corporate. Cold. Alexander smiled slightly. I've been called both. Often. But you're good with Jack and Olivia. Patient. Most business types would consider mentoring children beneath them. Children see the world honestly, Alexander replied. It's refreshing after boardroom politics. Jessica nodded. Still, I can't help wondering why you're really helping us. Alexander tensed slightly. This was dangerous territory. Your children remind me of someone I once knew, he said carefully. Someone I lost touch with. Jessica's phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. Big sale! Come back! They returned to find Thomas showing a customer his technique for joining wood without nails. A small crowd had gathered, enchanted by the older man's knowledge and passion. By day's end, they had sold almost their entire inventory and taken orders for more. Jack carefully counted their earnings. Over $800. We did it! Olivia exclaimed, hugging her brother. Alexander watched the twins celebrate with their mother, a complex emotion tightening his chest. For 20 years, he had pursued wealth and power, believing those would bring fulfillment. Yet here, helping this family he had once abandoned, he felt something he hadn't experienced in decades, genuine purpose. As they packed up, Thomas approached Alexander. I still don't know what you're after, the older man said quietly, but thank you for today. Alexander nodded, watching Jessica laugh with her children. Some debts can't be repaid with money, Mr. Turner. Thomas gave him a sharp look. What debts would those be? But Alexander just smiled and turned away, helping Jack fold the tablecloth. The truth would have to wait for another day. As summer turned to fall, Alexander's mentorship of Jack and Olivia evolved into a regular fixture in the Turner household. Every Tuesday evening, he arrived promptly at 6 with his laptop and educational materials, often staying for dinner afterward. The business lessons had expanded beyond pricing and marketing to include basic accounting, customer service, and even simple website creation. What began as a calculated approach to help his estranged sister's family had become something Alexander genuinely looked forward to each week. The twins' eager minds and different learning styles challenged him in ways his executive team never did. Jack absorbed information quickly, but needed hands-on application, while Olivia asked probing questions that sometimes left Alexander searching for answers. On a crisp October afternoon, Alexander pulled his Bentley into the Turner's driveway. Instead of his usual business attire, he wore jeans and a navy sweater. Clothes he rarely wore, but thought might help him blend in better with the family. Thomas was in the front yard raking leaves, and he nodded as Alexander approached. Their relationship had warmed slightly over the past months, though Thomas still maintained a cautious distance. "They're in the garage workshop," Thomas said, leaning on his rake. "Fair warning, they're excited about something." Alexander smiled. "I'll brace myself." The garage had been transformed since his first visit. What was once a cluttered space was now an organized workshop, with labeled shelves, proper lighting, and a dedicated area for the twins' business operations. The money from their market sales had been reinvested in better tools and materials. "Mr. Blackwood," Jack called when Alexander entered. Both twins were wearing the shop aprons Alexander had given them, emblazoned with the Turner Toys logo he'd helped them design. "We have big news," Olivia said, nearly bouncing with excitement. "We got invited to the Winter Wonderland Craft Fair," Jack finished. Alexander raised his eyebrows, genuinely impressed. "That's Phoenix's largest holiday market, very competitive." "They saw our toys at the Camelback Market," Olivia explained. "They said Grandpa's work is exceptional craftsmanship with commercial appeal." "That's their way of saying people will buy it," Jack added with a grin. "It's a tremendous opportunity," Alexander agreed. "When is it?" "December 10th, 12, Olivia said. "We need to make a lot more inventory." Jessica appeared in the doorway, connecting the garage to the house. Alexander noticed immediately that she looked more tired than usual, dark circles under her eyes. "They haven't stopped talking about it since the invitation arrived," she said with a strained smile. "Mom said we can skip school on Friday to set up our booth," Jack said proudly. Alexander crossed to Jessica. "Are you feeling all right?" he asked quietly. She waved off his concern. "Just a bad day. They come and go." Alexander had learned enough about multiple sclerosis to recognize when Jessica was downplaying her symptoms. Over the months, he'd witnessed good days when she moved easily, and bad days when fatigue and pain limited her activities. "Kids, why don't you show your grandfather your booth design ideas?" Jessica suggested. "Mr. Blackwood and I need to discuss something." The twins hurried outside, and Jessica sank into a chair at the small desk they'd set up for business operations. "I received a letter from my neurologist yesterday," she said without preamble. "They're recommending a new treatment that might slow the progression, but—" She trailed off, looking away. "The insurance won't cover it," Alexander finished. Jessica nodded. "Even with the payment plan they offer, it's beyond what we can manage right now." Alexander fought to keep his expression neutral while inside. Frustration burned. His sister was suffering needlessly when he had millions that could solve her problems instantly. "The toy business is doing well," he said carefully. "Perhaps—" "That money is for the kids' future," Jessica interrupted firmly. "They've worked too hard. I won't take that from them." Alexander respected her pride, but felt increasingly frustrated by the constraints of his self-imposed secret. Every instinct told him to reveal himself as her brother, to explain that helping her wasn't charity, but family obligation. Yet fear held him back, fear that she would reject him, that his 20 years of absence couldn't be forgiven. "There might be other options," he said instead. "Clinical trials or assistance programs." Jessica sighed. "I've researched everything. There's a 6-month waiting list for the program I qualify for." Before Alexander could respond, Thomas appeared in the doorway, his expression troubled. "Jessica, that Martin fellow from the bank called. He says we need to discuss the mortgage." Jessica closed her eyes briefly. "I'll call him back tomorrow." After the lesson ended, Alexander drove home, his mind racing. The situation was worse than he'd realized. Jessica's health was declining, and now they faced financial pressure from the bank. He needed to act, but without revealing his identity or offending their pride. The next morning, Alexander cancelled his meetings and drove to his company's legal department. "I need to establish a foundation," he told his corporate counsel, Diane. "Today?" Diane raised an eyebrow, but knew better than to question her boss's urgent requests. "What type of foundation?" "Medical assistance for families affected by MS," Alexander said. "I want it operational by next week, with a first-year funding commitment of $5 million. By evening, the framework was in place. The Phoenix Health Alliance would provide grants to families needing medical treatment not covered by insurance. Applications would be reviewed by an independent board, ensuring Alexander couldn't be accused of favoritism when the Turners inevitably received assistance. That same night, he called a former college roommate who now served as regional director for one of Phoenix's largest banks. "James, I need information on a mortgage held by your bank," Alexander said. "Family name is Turner, in the Pine Hills neighborhood." "Alex, you know I can't discuss specific customer accounts," James replied. "I'm not asking for details. I'm telling you that Black Edge Technologies is establishing a significant banking relationship, and I expect certain community-focused considerations in return." There was a pause on the line. "What kind of considerations?" "Mortgage flexibility for families facing medical hardships, starting with the Turners." 2 days later, Jessica received a call from Martin at the bank, informing her that their mortgage had been selected for a hardship program that would reduce their payments by 30% for the next year. Alexander's next move was subtler. He arranged for information about the Phoenix Health Alliance to be included in mailings to all neurologists' offices in the city, ensuring Jessica's doctor would receive the application forms. The Tuesday before Thanksgiving, Alexander arrived for his usual mentoring session to find the house in disarray. Olivia answered the door, her eyes red from crying. "Mum's in the hospital," she said, her voice breaking. She couldn't feel her legs this morning. Alexander felt his heart constrict. "Where's your brother and grandfather?" "At the hospital. Our neighbor Mrs. Gutierrez is watching me until they get back." Alexander guided Olivia to the living room couch and sat beside her. "Can you tell me which hospital?" "Banner University Medical," Olivia said, wiping her eyes. "Grandpa said it's an MS flare-up. He said she'll be okay, but he looked really worried." Alexander hesitated, then made a decision. "Get your jacket. I'm taking you to see your mum." Mrs. Gutierrez was initially skeptical about letting Olivia leave with Alexander, but relented after a phone call to Thomas confirming it was okay. On the drive to the hospital, Alexander kept up a steady stream of reassuring conversation while his mind raced with concern. MS flare-ups could range from mild to severe, and without proper treatment, each one potentially caused permanent damage. They found Jessica in a private room, looking pale against the white sheets. Jack sat in a chair beside her bed, while Thomas spoke with a doctor in the hallway. "Olivia!" Jessica's face brightened seeing her daughter. Then confusion crossed her features. "Alexander? You didn't have to—" "Of course I did," he said simply, staying by the door as Olivia rushed to her mother's side. Thomas returned, surprise registering when he saw Alexander. "Mrs. Gutierrez called, said you were bringing Olivia." "I hope that's all right," Alexander said quietly. Thomas studied him for a moment, then nodded. Thank you. The doctor returned with forms for Jessica to sign. As I was explaining, Ms. Turner, you're an excellent candidate for the new treatment protocol. Your application to the Phoenix Health Alliance was approved this morning for full coverage. Jessica looked stunned. But I never applied. Your neurologist submitted the paperwork last week, the doctor explained. It's quite fortunate. They're a new foundation, but very well funded. Alexander kept his expression neutral as Jessica glanced his way, questions in her eyes. That evening, after Jessica had received her first treatment and fallen asleep, Alexander found himself alone in the hospital cafeteria with Thomas. Strange coincidence, Thomas said, stirring his coffee. This foundation appearing right when we need it. Alexander met the older man's gaze steadily. Sometimes timing works out. The bank program too, and now this. Thomas set down his spoon. I've spent 40 years in business, Mr. Blackwood. I recognize patterns. Alexander remained silent. The question is why, Thomas continued. Why my daughter? Why her family? Alexander chose his words carefully. Have you considered that some debts don't appear on balance sheets, Mr. Turner? Thomas's eyes narrowed. What are you saying? Alexander stood. Only that helping your family has given me more satisfaction than making my first million. Take that as you will. As he walked away, Alexander felt Thomas's gaze following him. The older man was piecing things together, and soon Alexander would have to decide, continue the charade or finally face the truth of who he was, and the brother he had failed to be 20 years ago. December arrived with cool breezes and holiday decorations throughout Phoenix. The Winter Wonderland Craft Fair was just days away, and the Turner family's garage workshop buzzed with activity. Thomas had worked overtime to create enough inventory, his skilled hands crafting each piece with precision, despite his growing suspicions about Alexander's true identity. Jessica had returned home from the hospital a week after her flare-up. The new treatment seemed to be working. She still had difficult days, but her energy had improved, and the severe symptoms had subsided. She spent afternoons in the workshop, helping with finishing touches, sanding edges, and applying varnish, while the twins packaged completed toys in the custom boxes Alexander had ordered. Alexander had been unusually quiet during his last few visits. The Tuesday mentoring sessions continued, but something had changed. He seemed distracted, often pausing mid-sentence, as if wrestling with a decision. The confident CEO had been replaced by a man clearly carrying a burden. On the Thursday before the craft fair, Alexander arrived unexpectedly at the Turner home. A light rain fell, rare for Phoenix, making the desert air smell fresh and clean. Jessica answered the door, surprise evident on her face. Alexander, we weren't expecting you until tomorrow to help with setup. I needed to speak with you, he said, his expression serious. Is this a good time? She nodded, stepping back to let him in. The kids are at school, and Dad's picking up some last-minute supplies. Alexander followed her to the kitchen, where she had been sorting price tags. The wooden fox he'd purchased months ago sat on the counter beside her purse. You kept it, he said, picking up the small toy. The kids insisted, Jessica explained. They said it was the first one you picked up that day. Alexander turned the fox in his hands. Jessica, there's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you months ago. Before he could continue, the back door opened and Thomas entered, shaking raindrops from his jacket. He stopped when he saw Alexander. Mr. Blackwood, he said, his tone neutral. Didn't expect to see you today. An awkward silence filled the kitchen. Alexander was just about to tell me something important, Jessica said, glancing between the two men. Thomas set down his shopping bag. I think I know what it is. He fixed Alexander with a steady gaze. I've been doing some research of my own. Alexander Blackwood didn't exist 20 years ago, at least not with that name. Alexander's face paled slightly. You've been investigating me. Dad, what are you talking about? Jessica asked. Thomas ignored her question. You changed your name when you started your company. Before that, you were Alexander Wilson. He turned to his daughter. Your maiden name, Jessica. Jessica stared at Alexander, confusion giving way to disbelief. That's not possible. My brother left after your parents died, Thomas finished. When you were 17, you argued about your future, and he walked away, never contacted you again. Alexander placed the wooden fox carefully on the counter. I've thought about that day for 20 years, he said quietly. What I should have said instead of what I did say. Jessica gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles white. My brother was angry, impulsive. You're nothing like him. People change, Jessica, Alexander said. Success changed me. Loneliness changed me. And seeing that birthmark on Olivia's wrist that first day, exactly like yours, changed me again. Jessica unconsciously touched her own wrist, where the crescent-shaped birthmark matched her daughter's. If you're really Alex, why the secrecy? Why the games? Alexander met her eyes. Because I didn't know how to say I was sorry. Because I was afraid you'd shut the door in my face. Because I didn't deserve forgiveness after abandoning you. Jessica's breathing quickened. 20 years, Alex. 20 years without a word. I tried to find you after 5 years, he said, when I had my first success. But you'd moved, changed your name after marriage. The private investigators I hired couldn't locate you. Or maybe you didn't try hard enough, Jessica countered, anger flashing in her eyes. That's fair, Alexander admitted. I buried myself in work, built my company, convinced myself you were better off without me. Then one day, I turned down this street and saw 2 children selling wooden toys. Thomas watched them carefully, saying nothing. So all of this, the mentoring, the help, the foundation, was just to ease your guilt? Jessica asked, her voice breaking. It started that way, Alexander acknowledged. But then I got to know Jack and Olivia. I saw how much of you is in them. I watched how you fought through your bad days without complaint. I realized how much I'd missed, how empty success was without family. The sound of the front door opening interrupted them. Jack and Olivia burst in, their school backpacks bouncing. Mom, our teacher let us out early to work on... Jack stopped mid-sentence, registering the tension in the room. What's wrong? Jessica quickly wiped her eyes. Everything's fine. Mr. Blackwood just stopped by to discuss the fair. Alexander looked at the twins, his niece and nephew, wanting to tell them everything, but respecting Jessica's right to decide when and how they would learn the truth. Olivia studied the adults' faces. You're not fighting, are you? No, sweetheart, Jessica assured her. We're just having an important conversation. About grown-up stuff, Jack concluded, with the wisdom of an 8-year-old. Come on, Olivia. Let's check on the new puzzles in the workshop. After the twins left, Thomas cleared his throat. I'll give you 2 some privacy. When they were alone, Jessica sank into a kitchen chair. I don't know what to say to you, Alex. Part of me wants to hug you, and part wants to scream at you. Alexander remained standing. You can do both. I deserve it. A ghost of a smile crossed Jessica's face. You always did think you knew what was best for me. I was wrong, Alexander said simply. You chose your own path, and look at what you've created. 2 amazing children, a loving home. A mountain of medical bills and a house in foreclosure, Jessica added bitterly. The medical bills are covered, Alexander said. The foundation is real, Jessica, and the bank isn't foreclosing. I made sure of that. Jessica's eyes flashed. So you've been secretly controlling our lives, deciding what problems to fix like some billionaire guardian angel. I wanted to help without what? Without revealing who you really were. Without giving me the choice to accept or refuse your help. Jessica stood up, swaying slightly. You had no right. You're right, Alexander acknowledged. I was a coward. I should have told you the truth from the beginning. Jessica steadied herself against the table. Why now? Why tell me today? Alexander took a deep breath. Because tomorrow is the anniversary of our parents' death. Because I've missed 20 Christmas mornings with my only family. Because I'm tired of pretending to be just a mentor to those amazing kids. Tears filled Jessica's eyes. I missed you too, Alex. Even when I was angriest, I missed my big brother. The sound of rushed footsteps interrupted them. Olivia appeared in the doorway, her face flushed with excitement, holding an old photograph. Mom! We found this in Grandpa's old toolbox when we were looking for the wood polish. She thrust the photo forward. It looks like you when you were young, but who's the boy with you? Jessica and Alexander both froze. The photograph showed two children, a teenage boy with his arm around a younger girl, both smiling in front of a Christmas tree. Jack appeared behind his sister. He looks like Mr. Blackwood, but younger. Thomas appeared in the doorway. I kept that photo all these years. Found it in Jessica's things when she moved in with me. Thought it might be important someday. Jessica took the photo, her hands trembling. After a long moment, she looked up at Alexander, then at her children. Kids, she said gently, there's someone very important I want you to meet. She gestured to Alexander. This is your Uncle Alex. My brother. Olivia's eyes widened. Uncle, but you said your brother was gone. I was, Alexander said, kneeling to their level. For a very long time. That was my mistake, the biggest one I've ever made. Jack studied Alexander's face carefully. Is that why you helped us? Because you're family? That's exactly why, Alexander replied. Family takes care of each other. I forgot that once, but I never will again. Olivia stepped forward uncertainly, then threw her arms around Alexander's neck. I knew you seemed familiar, she whispered. Over the next hour, the full story emerged. Jessica explained to the twins about their uncle, the argument that separated them, and how fate had brought them back together. Alexander answered their endless questions about where he'd been and why he'd changed his name. To make a fresh start, but I carried your mother with me always. Later that evening, as Alexander prepared to leave, Thomas walked him to the door. You could have told me, the older man said. Would you have believed me without proof? Alexander asked. Thomas considered this. Probably not, but I believe you now, and I believe you want to make things right. More than anything, Alexander replied. Then be here tomorrow at 7, Thomas said. We're leaving for the craft fair early. Family should arrive together. As Alexander drove home through the rainy Phoenix night, a weight lifted from his shoulders. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. 20 years of absence couldn't be erased in a day. Jessica's forgiveness would come slowly, if at all. But for the first time since spotting those twins at their humble toy stand 6 months ago, Alexander Blackwood, once Alexander Wilson, felt truly hopeful. Tomorrow would mark a new beginning for all of them.